This is Millie Weaver, or Millennial Millie here, and I'm going to be addressing some of the latest events that have followed this new purge on Facebook against conservatives like InfoWars, Paul Joseph Watson, Laura Loomer, Milo Yiannopoulos, and even leftist Louis Farrakhan. So, big tech has been cracking down on censorship against conservatives, as many of us all know, and we can't help but wonder the timing. Gee, it can't be because we're coming up against the 2020 presidential election and big tech is run by a bunch of Silicon Valley leftists that are terrified and shaking in their boots because the Democrat Party doesn't have a solid candidate that can actually face off with President Trump. The leftists, the Democrats, liberals, whatever you want to call them, they are panicking right now. And that is why we're seeing this crackdown on free speech all across social media. Now, this is going to have lasting ramifications. It's much more than just the purge and censorship of social media. It's much more. We have conservative voices like Laura Loomer being banned from Uber Eats, Uber, PayPal, even her Chase bank account was revoked from her. Conservatives are being discriminated against based on their political affiliation. Now, some conservatives out there, namely the neocon milquetoast conservatives, are essentially justifying the censorship on social media, saying that private businesses should be allowed to censor whoever they want on their platform and that it's their right. And they compare it to the baker shop in Colorado when that's completely different. There are many reasons why those two are entirely different situations. One, the baker in Colorado didn't have a monopoly on the public square of free speech in this nation, which predominantly has an effect on our electoral outcomes. And another reason is that the issue between the Colorado baker was that you had a man exercising his religious right to not be forced to participate in something that went against his religious right, which was Christianity, versus a gay couple that wanted him to make a cake for them that went against his religious right, and it was their sex rights versus his religious rights. And this all has to do with protected persons and protected classes that are essentially civil rights. Now, that's what brings me to this argument. Well, what should we do to prevent the further banning and discrimination against conservatives across not just social media, but many businesses and services? We're coming to the point where conservatives are being physically attacked, ran out of diners, denied business. What's next? Are conservatives going to be denied the right to go into a grocery store and buy groceries? MasterCard's even talking about revoking people's ability to have cards if they're using their card to essentially subscribe or monetarily help people that they deem to be dangerous. This is how it's coming. This is what is ramping up right now, the discrimination against conservative voices. That's why I believe that we should be petitioning our politicians to add political affiliation to the protected classes, because now conservatives all across our country are going to be being discriminated against these liberal, big fascist corporations that kind of, in a sense, run our lives. Now, let's address what happened after this purge happened, where we saw Laura Loomer and Alex Jones, Milo, and everyone else kicked off of Instagram, and Paul Watson kicked off of Facebook. Well, at first we saw many of the grassroots conservative voices out there, like Mark Dice, Paul Watson, myself, and many others, loudly shouting out about the censorship and saying something needs to be done. We need our president, we need our representatives to act because they're intentionally trying to censor us, silence us, so that they can meddle with the election. Now, eventually the neocons, milquetoast conservatives came out and supported our right to essentially exist on the internet. They started standing against the censorship. And then finally, to everyone's shock and amazement, President Trump started tweeting InfoWars content, namely one of my videos from my Millennial Watson, and also tweets from Lauren Southern. So, of course, CNN, who are the biggest Trump haters and the biggest InfoWars haters of all, melted down. They literally lost their minds. Like Brian Stelter, Oliver Darcy. Oliver Darcy was the first to melt down, and he literally blocked me because I called him fake news and essentially pointed out that he was telling lies and full of it. And then, Brian Stelter went on this amazing rant. You guys this is something you guys have to see for yourself. Brian Stelter goes on this
InfoWars president. He is promoting the same alternative universe as InfoWars and sharing videos from repugnant characters. Now, InfoWars, of course, is that web show and website led by rageaholic Alex Jones. Full of fear-mongering and conspiracy theorizing, InfoWars tells viewers that the world is out to get them. Jones is facing multiple lawsuits related to his lies about the Sandy Hook school massacre and the murder of DNC staffer Seth Rich. But none of this seems to repel President Trump. InfoWars content is useful to him. InfoWars personalities align with him. He even gave an interview to Alex Jones back on the campaign trail. On Saturday, Trump went on a Twitter spree and said it's so great to watch this while sharing a video from InfoWars. He also repeatedly retweeted a guy named Paul Joseph Watson, one of the InfoWars figures who's been banned by Facebook. He also retweeted a strange video about Islam from a user named Deep State Exposed that buys into the QAnon theory. This is troubling stuff. A lot of it is troubling stuff. And at the same time, the president's decrying Facebook's action. Now, you may have heard about this. Facebook decided to block 6 users as well as InfoWars as an organization. The high-profile names include Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan, who's been called out for his anti-Semitic.
That Brian Stelter, of all people, called me a reprehensible character. All because I made a video while reporting for InfoWars at a Donald Trump rally talking to the attendees, and many of which were Black Trump supporters. And essentially, all I did was give them a platform, give them a voice to speak, and essentially tell us all why they support President Trump. Well, no. Brian Stelter melted down. You can't have InfoWars reporters out there showing that Trump has Black support. See, because that would go against the entire liberal mainstream media narrative that Trump's this horrible racist and he doesn't have any Black support. Brian Stelter, man, I tried to give him an opportunity to go ahead and retract his Russia collusion stories a couple months ago before the disaster Mueller report came out, and he wouldn't take it. He wasn't going to do it. And then finally that Mueller report came out, and man, he just made a fool of himself. And I really feel like that's what's happening with many of these leftists. They're doubling down because they feel ridiculous and they can't admit that they were wrong because of pride. And so what's Brian Stelter going to do? He's going to further dig his heels in, do a hit piece on me on his network CNN, which has failing ratings, claim I'm some, reprehensible character, and that InfoWars is some horrible content that should be banned off of the face of the earth. The rest of this CNN clip, which we're not going to play because we don't want them to flag us and try to get us banned even more, You can see that Oliver Darcy just goes in on a field day when he opens up with his panel and just keeps on pushing to get InfoWars banned. He wants everything with all his might to get InfoWars banned. Funny thing is, you know, Oliver Darcy once tried to get hired by InfoWars. He also once worked for Campus Reform. You know, many would say he was trying to butter up with the right wing. And then what happened? He just goes over to the establishment Democrat media. We know that CNN is Democrat run. I mean, my goodness, they're pushing the party line. But it just goes to show the character of some of these CNN pundits that want to sit there and point the finger at InfoWars for fake news, when not too long ago, they were pushing this abhorrent fake hoax that the Covington High School boys were a bunch of racists and that they were attacking some Native American guy who was out there screaming and yelling vehement things in their face. So it just goes to show. Now, this is huge that President Trump has taken this stance and actually tweeted InfoWars and essentially showed that not that he's an InfoWars supporter necessarily, okay? Anti-censorship president, and that is the key here. We don't want to get in some Democrat like Joe Biden that's going to essentially continue to push for censorship. That's what we're going to see from leftist candidates. You know, even Andrew Yang, on his website has been talking about and pushing for a news ombudsman agency within our government that regulates news and speech all across the internet. It's not just Yang. Many of them are pushing for essentially a fake news fake news agency that monitors if people are fake news. And we all know how that's a slippery slope. That's going to take away free speech entirely, and it'll take away journalists that are out there actually on site and seen when events happen that can tell you what's really happening. See, it used to be that the mainstream media had a monopoly on the news. Kind of like how social media companies right now, like Twitter and Facebook, have a monopoly on social media. But then, what happened? Well, the internet exploded. Everyone started going on social media sites and being able to do freelance journalism, rogue journalism, essentially guerrilla journalism. And that's what started competing with CNN. So they're crying and throwing a hissy fit because guerrilla journalists out there that propped up because of the creation of social media are completely kicking their butt and making fools out of them. Because then when they try to put out fake stories, hoaxes like the Covington High School story and such, they then get proven wrong by guerrilla journalists with even cell phones. This is why they're calling for our banning and removal. And anything else they're telling you is absolutely untrue. They're trying to say we're reprehensible characters or deplorable or whatever term they use to demonize us and dehumanize us. It's merely because they see us as a threat against their tyrannical monopolies that they hold and the power that they have unfairly used against Americans to deceive the American public. That's why InfoWars, myself, Caitlin Bennett, Paul Watson, and many other of our InfoWars staff and reporters are doing our best job to get the news and the truth out to you as best we can while we can. But it's important that people like you speak out so that we can continue to operate on these platforms. Call your congressmen and women, your senators. Make your voice loud. We need to be as loud as we can while we still have our voices and our ability to do that. And also, please go to InfoWarsStore.com and support us. There are so many amazing shirts, hats, everything you can do to walk around and represent InfoWars and essentially the most banned rebel media network out there because, man, we are punk rock when we're getting banned from virtually everything these days by these ninny establishment SJWs like Brian Stelter. This is ridiculous. So go to InfoWarsStore.com, support us, spread the links, share as much as you can while you can. This is Millie Weaver signing off for InfoWars.com.